Welcome to the Stitch Sessions. In this week's tutorial, we're going to be working on the Up and Away baby blanket. So for those of you that have followed along with me for a little while now, you will remember that a couple weeks back, I did a balloon motif. And I showed you how to create the balloon applique and then how to turn it into a square. And I had mentioned that I was working on this as part of a larger project. So this is the project. So once you create your balloon squares, you're going to make as many as you'd like. And then you're going to assemble your blanket. So now I actually made some balloon squares and then I made some blank squares just to kind of create a little bit more interest. And then at the end, we're going to create this really dainty, nice and easy diamond stitch border. And if you know how to chain, you'll be ready to go with that. Now this one still does need to be blocked, so it looks like it's just got a little bit of a wavy effect there, but I actually really like it. I think for baby blankets especially, it just makes it look so gentle and precious and just pretty. I absolutely adore it. So the other wonderful thing I like about these types of projects is they're modular. So you can take them with you wherever you go if you want to work on them on the go. So let's check out the materials we're going to need to create our Up and Away baby blanket. Okay, so for this project, the yarn that I used was the Flex yarn by Loops and Threads, and the color is Sunshine. I used 2 skeins of this yarn, and it contains 185 grams per skein, which has 355 yards or 324 meters. Okay, and you're also going to need some yarn for your balloon motifs. And I go over this in the actual balloon motif tutorial. I just had a lot of scrap yarn left over, so that's why I thought this would be a perfect opportunity for creating this blanket. So I would say if you want all of your balloons to be the same color, you wouldn't need more than 100 grams skein. So whatever other color you choose, maybe your balloons are going to be all one color, or you're going to use multicolors like I did because I was using up a lot of scrap yarn. The main thing to remember is that if you're using scrap yarn, you want them all to be the same weight of yarn. So this is a medium 4 weight yarn that I'm using for the backdrop. So you want to make sure that whatever colors you use for your balloons are also going to be a medium 4 weight yarn. Okay, so just keep that in mind. They are recommending a 5mm hook for this project, which actually is the hook size I'm using, which is also known as an H or a size 8. Okay. Also make sure that you have, as always, a pair of scissors and a yarn needle to sew in all your ends. There's going to be a lot of ends with this project, so make sure you have that on hand. Now let's get talking about how we're going to construct the project. So our blanket is going to consist of 25 squares. And so we're going to make squares that have our balloon motif on it. And then we're also going to construct squares that are just blank. And so the tutorial for the balloon squares, I will leave a link for in the description box down below. This tutorial was released just a couple of weeks ago. So you're going to have to go back, watch that tutorial to create your balloon squares. And then in this tutorial, I'm going to begin by showing you how to make the blank squares and then how we're going to place our squares, put them together, and create the border for our finished blanket project. So a couple things you should know, you're going to need 12 of these balloon squares, and then you're going to need 13 of these blank squares. So our blanket is going to be 5 squares across and 5 squares deep, okay? So I'm going to get you going on the blank square to start off with. Or you can pause this video and start creating your balloon squares first. It doesn't really matter which ones you start with, but just make sure that you reference that to create your balloons. So let's get started. So to create your square, we're going to start by creating a magic ring or a cinch circle. Essentially, it's the same way you would start a slip knot, okay, just like that. You're going to pull your yarn through, but you're not going to resolve the slip knot. So you're going to leave this ring kind of hanging out here. Will feel a little weird at the beginning, but then we're going to chain 1, and that tends to secure our ring in place. And I always just like to move that tail out of the way. Okay, and then you're going to chain an additional 2. This will count as a double crochet stitch. Next, we're going to place a double crochet into the center of the ring. So it's going to feel a little wonky at the beginning here. Okay, just like that. And now you're going to continue placing 1 double crochet stitch into the ring until you have a total of 12 stitches. So that chain 3 will count as 1. So once you've got your chain 3, you're going to do an additional 11 double crochet stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and continue placing double crochet stitches into my ring until I have a total of 12 stitches. Okay, I've got 12 double crochets into that ring. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that tail to cinch this circle shut. Just like that. Okay, and that's going to cinch that center in nice and tight. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the top of that chain 3, and it's easy for it to get lost. Sometimes people think that that is the first stitch. It is not. That is the top of the chain 3 right there. You're going to insert your hook. Whoops, that's the tail. And you're going to slip stitch to join your round. Just like that. Okay, and round 1 of your square is complete. So now we're going to move on to round number 2. For round 2, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into the space between the stitches. So that's the top of the chain 3. Just trying to pull it apart here. So see how there's a space there? That's the space between your stitches. And there is a space right around here. Just trying to make sure you guys can see it because our chain 3 was pretty snug to that. So the space next to that stitch is right there. So that's where we're going to slip stitch into. And the reason why we're going in between the stitches is because we want to match the effect that we created when we created our balloon motif. So that's the spacing right in there. So I'm going to slip stitch into there. So for round number 2, we're working in between the stitches and not into the stitch. So you're going to chain 3. And then you're going to go back into that same space. There we go. Now you can see it a lot clearer. And you're going to double crochet. So technically we have 2 stitches coming out of this space, 2 double crochets there. So now we're going to go into the next space, which is right there. And we are going to place 2 double crochets. So this is a row full of increases. So we're increasing our number of stitches here. So in row 1, or round 1, I should say, we had 12 stitches, and in round number 2, you should end up with 24 stitches by the time you get to the end. So continue placing 2 double crochets in between each stitch, and I'll meet you up at the end of round number 2. Okay, I've just finished my 24th stitch. So your work is looking something like this. So you can see the center round just gets a little bit more spread out, gives that pinwheel effect, which is similar. If you look at our balloon motif, very similar to how we created that initial circle there, okay? So now what we want to do for round number 2 is we want to find, again, the top of that chain 3, which is right here, okay? We're going to slip stitch to join. Just like that. And now we're going to move on to round number 3. So we're going to chain 3 again. 1, 2, and 3. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the next stitch and I'm going to place 2 double crochet stitches. So make sure you don't miss this one here. It's right next to that chain 3. So I'm going to insert my hook. And I'm going to place 2 double crochets into that stitch. So our repeat for this round is going to be to place 1 double crochet and then 2 double crochets. 1, 2, 1, 2. And so that's what's going to help your circle lie flat. So into the next stitch, we're only going to place 1 double crochet. Into the next stitch, we're going to place 2 double crochets. Just like that. So continue doing that all the way around. The end of round 3, you should have 36 stitches. Okay, I've just completed round number 3. And again, I'm going to find the top of that chain 3 and I'm going to slip stitch to join. Just like that. So I have my 36 stitches. Now I'm ready to go on to round number 4. And this is going to be the last round that is going to remain circular in nature. So for round number 4, what we're going to do is we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. And right back into the same place we slip stitched, we're going to place another double crochet stitch. So we're going to do our increase right away in this round. Okay, so that is 2 stitches out of 1. And now into each of the next 2 stitches, we're going to place a double crochet. Now be careful here. Like I said in the previous round, it looks here like this stitch has already been worked, but remember we've been working into the slip stitched portion. So this stitch right beside it, so that's a slip stitch portion. This is the next stitch right there. So be careful. That's a common boo-boo that happens, and people then miss a stitch and it throws off your stitch count. So just something to be aware of. So the very next stitch is right in there. I'm going to make sure to get under both of those loops, just like that, and double crochet. And then the next stitches are easy to see. And then a double crochet into the next stitch. Okay, so I've got an increase in the first and then 2 individual double crochets in the next. And now in the following stitch, I'm going to place my increase, which is 2 double crochets. Okay, then I have 1 double crochet and 1 double crochet. So my repeat for this round is 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. So you're going to go all the way around. At the end of round number 4, you should have 48 stitches. Okay, just finishing round number 4. And as usual, I'm slip stitching to join my round. Okay, and I made sure I have 48 stitches. And now we are going to move on to squaring off our circle. I know that sounds funny. We're going to transform our circle into a square. So we know that a square has 4 sides and 4 corners. And we know we have 48 stitches. So we are going to have to create a corner in every 12th stitch in order to square off our sides. We're also going to have to start varying the heights of our stitches. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that right now. So to begin round number 5, what we're going to do is we are going to, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch over to the very next stitch here. And I do that sometimes just so that my seam isn't as obvious. So if you look here, you can see there's a little seam, hopefully it's subtle, that's running up the end there. So I'm going to do that, and now I'm going to create my very first corner. I'm going to chain 5. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that chain 5 counts as a double crochet and a chain 2 for the bend in our corner. Okay, then I'm going to go back into that same stitch and I'm going to place a double crochet. Just like that. So you're going to have this V shape here, and that's our very first corner. Into the next 2 stitches, we're going to place 1 double crochet. So we're coming out of that corner. We have another double crochet. Okay, and now into each of the next 6 stitches, we're going to place a half double crochet. So we have 1, I'm sorry, into each of the next 7 stitches, my apologies. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, half double crochet is pulling through all of those loops. 6 and then 7. So you can see we started with our double crochets and we went down to the half double crochet, and it just helps even out the rounded shape to square it off a little bit. So we're almost coming up to our next corner. So we're going to place a double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So we have 1, so we're going back up in height, and we have 2. And that is our very first side, which we used 12 stitches. So the corner was the first stitch, then we had 2 double crochets, that gives us 3. Then we had 7 half double crochets, which gives us 10, and then we had 2 more double crochets, which gives us 12. So now we start the process all over again. So your corners are technically a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, but because we had that chain 3 to begin, that's why we had the chain 5. So let's do another corner here together. Into the next stitch, you're going to place a double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet. See, there's our second corner there. Okay, and now you're going to repeat the exact same thing you did here. 2 doubles, 7 half doubles, 2 doubles, corner, and then repeat until you've got 4 sides and 4 corners. I'm going to meet up with you just as you're about ready to join up your round there. Okay, so I've just finished round number 5, and I've done my last double crochet, and now I've got my corner here. So I'm going to find the top of the 3rd chain, right? So there were 5 chains here. So my 3rd chain is there. I'm going to slip stitch to join. Oops. And then I'm actually going to slip stitch into that corner space, because I always like starting nicely in a corner my next round. So for now we have completed round number 5, which now should be looking much more like a square. It's probably still going to bow a little bit, but now you can see you've created some definite corners there. So in round 5, we added an additional 4 stitches only this time. So your stitch count should be 52 stitches. So now let's go on to round number 6, which even though it's a square now, we're working in a rounded fashion. That's why we call it working in the round. And that's round 6 is going to be our final round to finish creating our nice square like that. Okay, so we're going to work out of that corner, and we're going to chain 5 as before, but something is going to be a little different here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to go back into the corner space and place a double crochet. And what we're going to do is we're going to place another double crochet back into this same corner space. So we're adding a couple of extra stitches in the corner from what we did in the previous round, because again, we're trying to help, see how it still has a bit of a bowing out. We're trying to help the work straighten out on its sides and sit nice and flat in a relaxed fashion. So your corners now are going to consist of 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets. Now you'll notice I technically only have 1 on this side, because I like to always end off by placing the first, which technically is the last stitch, in the same corner there. Okay, and I'll show you that once we get there. Now into the next stitch, I'm actually going to do one more increase for this particular project. So I'm just going to make sure to move this out of the way because it's so easy for this stitch to get hidden here. And into that very first stitch, we're going to place 2 double crochets as well. So we really want to help this work sit nice and flat. Okay, just like that. And if you have gone ahead and done your balloon motifs first, you will remember that this is also what we did in the final round to square everything off. Now into each of all of the other stitches, you're just going to place 1 double crochet into each stitch until you have 1 stitch remaining before the corner. And by the way, I hadn't mentioned it before, but you should have 13 stitches along each side. So your stitch count will definitely increase by quite a few on each side by doing this double increase here. So go ahead and place 1 double crochet into each stitch, and I'll meet up with you when you've got 1 stitch left here before you hit the corner. Okay, I have 1 stitch left, so I'm going to place an increase there. So before and after every corner, we're going to place an increase. That means you're going to place 2 stitches into 1. Now we're going to work into our corner, and into our corners, we're going to place 2 double crochets, chain 2, and then 2 more double crochets, just like that. Whoops. See, now you can really see that corner is nice and defined. Look at how that side is turning out. I love it. So now coming out of the corner, the very first stitch will also get an increase. So we're increasing in 4 spots here technically. Okay, so we've got an increase in the stitch before the corner. Technically, this is an increase here in the corner. We've got a chain 2, another increase, meaning 2 stitches, and then an increase coming out of the corner. Each of your sides now, in your final round, will have a total of 19 stitches across. So that's an increase from 13 stitches across in the previous round. So in every side, on every side of this new round, you're going to increase by 6 stitches, okay? And so that is what you're going to do to finish off the round. You're going to repeat 1 double crochet into each stitch until you get to the last stitch. You increase, 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets, and an increase in the very first stitch coming out of there. And then 1 double crochet into all the stitches. So we're just using the double crochets now for this round, whereas before we used a few half double crochets. So all of these are double crochets. And now you know the pattern repeat of this round. So go ahead and do that, and you will have completed your blank square. Okay, I'm just finishing my last little corner here. So I've just done my last increase, and now I've come up to the first corner we created, right? So because there's only a chain 3 plus a chain 2, which gives you your corner, we have to place 1 more double crochet into that same space, and that will even out our corner. And then you're going to find the top of the 3rd chain, which is right about there, and you're going to slip stitch to join. And now our square is complete. So I just like to take the corners out there and stretch them out. And you can see now it sits nice and flat. And now our square shape is much more defined. So now I'm going to just snip off my yarn and pull it through. And then weave in that end. And this is what I'm calling the blank square. So that means there's no balloon motif in it. So now what you've got to do is you've got to repeat this for another 12 squares. So you want 13 blank squares in total, and then you want 12 balloon squares all together. So you want to have 25 squares. So now you're going to leave this video for a little while, and you are going to maybe watch a favorite show, listen to a great podcast, and you are going to create all of your squares. Then you're going to come back to this video and we're going to go through how to place all of your squares, how to set up your motif, and then how to start sewing your squares together. And then we'll move on to creating a border and your blanket will be done. Okay, so now you can see that I've already sewn a few of the rows together. So this is what it will eventually look like. And actually, I'm working from this side up. So there is a cluster of 3 and a cluster of 3. And so what we're going to do, and you can see here, is we're going to sew each square in a strip first, and then we'll take that strip and sew it together there. So I'm just going to take you through how to sew. We're going to use the mattress stitch, and then we're going to sew it the exact same way. Once you've created a strip, then we're going to sew it the same way onto the rest of your blanket. So let's get sewing up our squares. So I'm just reminding myself of the layout of this row here. Okay, so this is my last row I'm going to sew. So I know that I want these in this order. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this away now. And these are all with the right side facing up. So I'm going to take these first 2 here. Whoops, I'm going to have to sew in my, oh no. Okay, and I'm going to take, the right sides are facing up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to face them towards each other so that the right sides face each other. And I remember that this one is on the end, so this is where I'm going to sew. So I'm going to start this way. What happens is we're going to line up every single stitch with the front panel and the back panel, as I'm calling it, and that will give you a nice kind of sewn up seam here. So I'm going to just set this one aside for now and focus on our main square here. So what we want to do is cut a piece of yarn that's, I always like to do it double the length, because when you're sewing, you're actually going to use a lot more than just, you know, that length there. So this is actually left over from sewing up alongside. So I have quite a bit here. So I'm just going to use this whole piece. And you're going to take out your yarn needle here, and you can see it's got the eye will make it a lot easier to get your yarn through, and that's why it's important to understand the difference between a yarn needle and a thread needle. Okay, so once you've done that, you want to take your 2 sides. Again, the wrong sides are facing out. And what I like to do is find that chain 2 space right there. And we're going to use the mattress stitch first of all. So that means we're going to go in from the front to the back and then into the next stitch from the back to the front. So we're going to go this way. Different than a whip stitch. Some of you have seen me use the whip stitch before, where you just keep going in from the back and looping again, back and loop again. I like using the mattress stitch a lot of times for these particular types of projects. And I also like doing the outside loop. So let me just kind of go over that. So you can see the top of your stitches have those V's. The loops that are furthest away from you, that is the back loop of this panel. And then the loop that's closest to you, that's known as the front loop. So because we're going to use the outside loops, we're going to use the back loop of the back panel. And then we're going to find the front loop of the front panel. Okay, and that's how we're going to sew them together. But to start off with, we want to find one of the chains, and I always like to start with the first chain just before you hit the stitch, and then find the corresponding chain on the other side, which is this one right here. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to knot it so that it's nice and secure. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail, and that way I can weave it in after and it'll be nicely hidden. If you leave a tail that's too short after a knot, I find that weaving that in is just a little bit more challenging, and it makes it a lot easier for that tail to kind of poke out. But if you leave a little bit of a tail, like 1.5 inches or so, then you've got more room to play with when you are weaving it in. Just a little something there. Okay, so to begin now, so I've used the chain and now I'm going to find that first stitch here. So that's the first official stitch right there. And I'm going to go in through the front loop here. Hopefully you guys can see that. I feel like sometimes the camera doesn't want to focus properly. So I'm going in through the front loop, and then I'm going to find the corresponding stitch, which is this one right here, and I'm going to go in through the back loop. And the reason why I do that is because once you leave the right side facing up, it's just going to create a nice seamless ridge effect there. Now I'm going to go in from the back loop of the next stitch. Oops. Like that. And then I'm going to find the corresponding stitch, which is this one here, and go in down in through the front loop. So together these make the outside loops. Okay, you want to pull it snug but not tight, right? You don't want your work to bunch. You just want it to sit nice and flush. Now I go over to the next stitch and I go in from the front, come up like that. Then I find the corresponding stitch right there. So you can see that one's already been worked. I'm going to go into that one and go in through there. Just like that. So it's kind of like a little zigzaggy effect. And this is why it is super important that you have a consistent stitch count. If you have one extra stitch, you can always kind of hide it by stitching back into the same stitch twice. It does happen. This is pretty much it. You're going to sew all of your squares together, one to the other. So when I'm finished this one, I'm just going to do a couple of knots. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail, snip off my yarn, and then I'm going to bring back the next one, and I'm going to do the same thing. This is the blank square, right side up, fold it over. Then I'm going to sew this one the same way. Then I will bring the next one, same thing, right side, and fold it until I get a strip, just like this one. And then once I have a strip done, then I do the same thing. I turn the whole strip. Let me just kind of repeat that. So I bring back my blanket here and I turn the whole strip right side facing down. And then I do the same technique going all the way across. Of course, you're gonna have to cut a larger piece of yarn. And so all the way down. And you keep doing that until all of your squares are sewn nicely together. And you can see my blanket is coming along just nicely. And I've also been experimenting with adding a little tie there. I just did about 9 or 10 chains, and then I sewed it at the end just to kind of give it a little bit of a string coming from the balloon. I'm still debating whether or not I think I will leave just some of them with a little piece of yarn there. The only thing is with baby blankets, I don't like too much stuff hanging. So that is why I did the chain there. Or you can just leave them without the loop just like that, however you like to see your balloons. Okay, so in the meantime, you've got quite a bit of work ahead of you. I actually like doing this kind of stuff, the sewing stuff, because it's really mindless. You don't have to count any stitches. You don't have to do any of that. You put on a great show or podcast and you're off and running and sewing up all your squares. So once you're done that, I will meet back up with you again and we're going to do a border for our blanket. So we're almost there. Okay, so I have finished sewing all of my squares together and the project is looking like this. So you've got this beautiful square shape and you've got your cluster of balloons along each edge there. You're now ready to do our border. Now, as always, you're always going to get just a slight little dipping in the sides where they are seamed together. That's natural. It tends to happen, especially when you're working with modular projects. And this is the beauty of adding a border because that will completely get rid of that. And our border is going to be very super simple. So let's get to it right now. Okay, so this is what I have left of this skein, and I am hoping this is going to be enough to create the border that I want. But I am not going to fret because if I do run out of yarn, I have some of the flex yarn in this color that I'll add as an accent. So This is the second skein that I was using, and I really don't want to have to buy a whole other skein just for the border, but I feel really confident that I'm going to have enough. So what we're going to do is you're going to find a corner and make sure that the right side is facing up. So I'm just going to take this top right corner here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by placing a slip knot on my hook. Just like that. And now into my corner here, I'm just going to start at the top right corner. I'm going to insert my hook and I am going to slip stitch to join my yarn. And then we are going to begin our border, which is going to be very, very simple, very easy, but I think it'll have just an absolutely beautiful effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to skip a stitch. Remember that this first stitch is right here. And into the next stitch, we're going to slip stitch. And that is all you need to know for this border. So see how it creates a cute little loop like that? So you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. Skip the next stitch into the following stitch. You're going to slip stitch. So this is kind of like a version of the mesh stitch, but creating a little bit more of a rounded shape. So we're actually going to use the diamond mesh stitch. So in the first round, all you're going to see are these little chain loops. And that's it. You're going to do that all the way around your border. So 3 chains, skip a stitch into the next stitch, you slip stitch. Chain 3, skip a stitch into the next stitch, you will slip stitch. And you have something that looks like that, okay? So I'm going to leave you to do your first side, and then I'm going to meet up with you when you come up to your very next corner, just to kind of help you get around that bend there. So press pause, and I'll meet you back here when you're at that first corner. Okay, I haven't quite gotten to the edge yet, but I did want to address something. When you come to where your seams are, it can just get a little bit funny. If you're a little bit worried about kind of where to place your hook, you just follow the same principle. So I just chained 3, I'm going to skip this stitch, and the next one is actually the corner space here. So I'm just going to insert my hook, and sometimes it happens that I've gone into the corner space. Sometimes it happens that I've actually gone into the seam. So in this case, because I went into the corner space, I'm just going to skip over the seam. Whoops, I got to chain 3 first. Skip over the seam and then just go into the next corner space there. Okay, so you still have a nice consistent loop. So no big deal. And then you chain 3 again. And remember, your first stitch is here and you go into the next stitch. Okay, so this is more for those of you that are a little newer to crochet. I don't want you to be too nervous about that seam. So there we go. Okay, I'm going to finish off and then meet you in the corner. Okay, so I'm just coming up to the corner, and as luck would have it, I have 1 stitch left, and then I've got my corner space. Now, if I had 2 stitches left, I would skip that stitch and still go into this one. Then I would do my chain 3, and I would still go into the corner space. So that way your corners always have a little dip in it. So in this case, I do only have 1 stitch left. So I chain 3. And then I'm going to go into the corner to slip stitch. So that's kind of my goal, always slip stitching into a corner space here. Then I'll chain 3 and then do my usual, skip the next stitch, and into the following, I will slip stitch. Okay, so you can see you've got 2 little bumps coming out of each side of the corner there. And that's as easy as it is, okay? So now you've got all the tools, so you can see how subtle that is? It's so pretty. So we are gonna add another round or 2 if we can to actually create the mesh stitch. So for now, finish this whole round using your chains and slip stitches, and then I will meet up with you when we are gonna talk about row 2 or round 2 of our border. Okay, so I'm just at the very end, or I'm back to the beginning, I should say. So I've just done my chain 3, and I've got 1 stitch left, and I'm back in that corner space. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to slip stitch into this space here, into that loop, just like that. Okay, so round 1 is complete, so you've got that really pretty scallop. Now we're going to do for round 2 is we're going to continue using the same method. So we're going to chain 3, 2, and 3, and we're just simply going to go into our chain loops now, and we're going to slip stitch into there. So this is what creates that diamond mesh stitch, and you'll see that take effect a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, as we continue to do more of these stitches. So you're going to go into that next space and slip stitch. 1, 2, 3, into the next space and slip stitch. And that is pretty much what you're going to do all the way around. So now if I just pull that out there like that, you can now see that the mesh stitch is taking more of a diamond shape. And that is what we want to create. So you know what to do. You're going to continue doing your chain 3 and slip stitch. But now we're just going to slip stitch into all of our spaces. Chain 3, slip stitch, chain 3, slip stitch. All right, I've finished my border and it looks like this. I just love how it's this subtle little detail. It's a lacy little effect, but it just makes it just so precious and dainty. I love it. So this is how my blanket turned out. So you can see that the balloon clusters are around each corner. And like I said, I experimented with doing a little balloon string, and I'm actually pretty happy with leaving them kind of randomly done. So it's just like a little whip stitch idea, just enough to make it look like it's flying away. I may add a couple more. I'm not going to do strings on all of the balloons. I like the idea of just leaving them randomly done. But this is it. This is the Up and Away baby blanket. And I'm super happy with how it turned out. I would definitely create this again and try different colors for the back palette. I love the yellow. I think it would look really cool with a white background, and then the multicolored balloons I just think would be great. Or you could do it with all the same colors. But I'm very excited with how this came out. And I hope you found it somewhat easy. Like once you understood how to do your balloon square and your regular square, it's just a matter of replicating it and doing it over and over until you get the amount of squares that you desire. So my blanket is a perfect square, as you can see. And I'm super happy with how that came out. So if you have any questions about this tutorial, make sure to leave them for me in the comment box down below. You can also reach me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. Just pop me an email and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have. And don't forget to come visit me on the website at crochetcrafty.com and sign up for my monthly newsletter. I give away a free written pattern every month, and I also go over some of the projects we've gone through in the last few weeks if you've missed any of our tutorials. And if you are new here and you really like this project and are curious about future projects, make sure to click that subscribe button and click that notification bell so you'll stay up to date every time I upload one, which is every Wednesday morning. And if you did like this type of project and would like to see more, make sure to give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that I'm on the right track with the types of projects that you guys want to see. So blankets, baby blankets especially, I know are quite popular. So hope you like this one. And come and say hi to me. I'm on the socials at Facebook and Instagram at The Stitch Sessions. So in the meantime, guys, I hope you have an amazing day. Take care of yourself, take care of each other. And I look forward to seeing you guys in next week's session. Bye-bye.